Welcome to the True North podcast. My name is James McKenzie, and this is the first ever True North video podcast, and we're really excited to share it with you guys. If you haven't heard of True North, we are a local men's ministry out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and we are dedicated to creating environments where men can hear from God. And we truly believe that this podcast is one of those environments. We also host retreats and many other things. So hop on to truenorth.live. That's our website. It has all the events that we've got going on. You can read and find out more about what we're all about. But for now, I want to just welcome you to our first ever video podcast. We have a really exciting one this week where we're going to be walking through a guy named Marc Wright's story. His story is incredible, amazing ups and downs, going through prison, going through addiction, and just an incredible recovery from God and what that's looked like. So thank you for joining us this week. If you're on the audio podcast, welcome back. We're excited to have you guys still. Hop onto our social media. Check out what we got going on with this video podcast and share it and invite more people into this story. But for now, we'll kick it over to this week's podcast. Marc Wright. How are you, man?
Doing well.
Welcome to the True North podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Man,
I'm excited.
Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good. So, Marc, you've got an incredible story. You're actually going to be sharing part of your story at base camp here coming up soon. And so we just wanted to have you on and kind of walk through that journey with you. So if you don't mind, could we start out maybe with your childhood? Like, what did it look like being raised in your household?
I had a really normal all-American childhood. I grew up in Moore, Oklahoma. It was technically an Oklahoma City address, but Moore school districts. Both of my parents are still married to this day. They just celebrated 50 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have one sister. Grew up going to church. And everything, all my friends in my childhood called us the Leave It to Beaver family, because from an outsider's perspective, everything looked perfect to people.
Yeah.
Wasn't necessarily the case, but
Yeah.
from an outsider's perspective, it looked perfect.
Yeah. So did you guys attend church at that time?
Yeah. So I grew up going to Central Church of Christ, which is a Church of Christ in Moore, Oklahoma. Relatively large congregation, 400 to 500 members. My parents still go to this day.
Yeah.
So I was raised in the church. My grandfather was a deacon. I spent a lot of time sitting up there playing with toys while they were changing light bulbs and vacuuming the floors.
Yeah.
It was a huge part of my childhood.
So what about just your perception of what was going on while at church? Did you experience God early on at all, or just kind of know about him? Or
I would say that my first perspective of God was, I have to do this perfectly or I'm going to burn in hell. That's what it developed into real quickly, was like, man, there's a lot of items that you have to mark on this checklist, or bad news bears if you fail to meet these requirements.
Yeah.
It was very overwhelming to me.
Yeah. So how did that affect like your social life or your hobbies, activities, and stuff like that as a kid?
I would say that, I was pretty quick to disregard it. By about 12 or 13. I was very eager to be like, if this is the kind of God that will just send you to hell for not being perfect, then what's the point of trying?
Yeah.
And very early on, my activities and behaviors exemplified that by getting into trouble, at school, at home, doing things I shouldn't be doing. I was introduced to pornography around 12 years old. Um, all the things that the church tells you not to do. I was starting to
Explore.
dive right
Yeah.
in, just eager. And I was just entranced. I was completely intrigued by all the things that I was told not to do because they're bad. And I carried that on through the majority of my adulthood years.
Yeah. How did that affect your relationship with your parents?
So that's where it's kind of tricky. So during my up to my teenage, high school, college years, my mother was very devout. She would be in the church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday. Anytime the doors were open, she was there to volunteer. Just very integrated. My dad, not so much. I wouldn't necessarily say that he was ever an atheist, but I think agnostic would be a term that you could describe him.
Yeah.
He would spend Sundays on the golf course, or Sundays doing yard work, and it caused a lot of discussions and a lot of conflict between them as we were growing up.
Yeah.
That's changed over the past 5 to 10 years. There's been a huge change, a huge shift in his behaviors. He's there for the most part every Sunday, singing songs, and it's great to watch that
Yeah.
take place.
Yeah. So how about your relationship with them, and whenever you're making bad decisions, exploring all the things, how did they handle that with you? And
My mom showed a lot more grace than my dad did. I don't think that watching me engage in these things was ever easy for them. But as far as I remember, it was always my dad being like the rough one, the one yelling, "Why are you doing this?" Or I had the most conflict with him for sure.
yeah.
I wore her down to the point where she was throwing up her hands like, I don't know what to do with this. I know there was many thousands of nights of prayer on her end for guidance and wisdom on how to navigate that circumstance, because I know it couldn't have been easy. As I would have never acknowledged that at the time, but now being a father, and not having control over your kids, I can only imagine
Yeah.
what that was like.
Yeah.
I only pray that mine don't go down that same road.
Yeah. So let's talk about that road. What that looked like. You're starting to get older, maturing, and decisions start becoming a lot more serious. What kind of kicked that season off in your life?
I think I was, by the time I hit high school and I had friends that were driving, it started off with ditching class, leaving to go just hang out and play video games at friends' house. But by the time I hit senior year was when the marijuana and the alcohol and the LSD came into play. And yeah, I mean, once I got high the first time, I was like, this is what I've been missing. This is what it's all about. And at first it was a party. It was a big party. I wanted to party all the time. And from people that didn't know me, an outsider's perspective, it appeared that I had my stuff together. I was always a straight A student. I went to the community college after high school, and then went to OU after that. Met my first wife, got married, always had a job, So it looked like I was successful. And then, but the whole time I was diving deeper and deeper into this addiction that went from pot and alcohol down this road into pills and methamphetamine and then eventually heroin. Um, and once I reached that point, then the legal issues started happening, and the divorce was in the near future, and couldn't hold down a job. So things finally just started falling apart. But it took over a decade for it to get to that point.
Yeah. So let's dive into what that all looked like. So you get married pretty young, it sounds like. So what happened there?
Uh, she was a good woman. She is a good woman. I mean, I don't have a relationship with her today, but she was Christian. Um,
And had you left God completely at this point? Were you hanging on in any aspects or?
I wouldn't say that there was ever a period of time in my life that I just was like, God doesn't exist. But I think highly agnostic,
Yeah.
it was appropriate for me too. Like I didn't care if there was a God or wasn't a God. I knew if Judgment Day came, I wasn't going to make the cut. So what's the point of trying? Um, but I would go to church with her occasionally when I wasn't sick. Um, but yeah, she was successful, college degree, master's degree, uh, bought a house, and I was there with her. So for people that didn't know us, we looked like, our neighbors, all American couple,
Yeah.
young couple coming up.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. And she finally just got tired. She got tired of being married to someone that was going to work in the day and then running the streets at night and not having a clue what was going to happen next, especially once the legal issues started happening. Once I got arrested the first time, it was every 6 months I was going to jail. And
What happened when you got arrested?
it was all drug charges.
Yeah.
Yeah, like possessions, DUIs, stuff like that. A couple shoplifting charges.
Yeah.
But that's a headache. That's chaos for everybody that's around you.
Yeah.
Because saying that it only affects you is just super naive. Because your family worries about you. Especially the ones that have never been to jail. They're just like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then just navigating the judicial system itself is just complex. Like the first go around, you don't know what's going to happen.
How far into that first marriage were you whenever things really started falling apart?
So we got married in November of 2007. So let's back it up. We went on a Hawaiian vacation with my dad's whole side of the family for my grandma's 75th. And I think that was the point in time that everyone was like, something's not right. Because you can look at family photos and there's 23 of us lined up on a beach and everyone's wearing their Hawaiian shirts and shorts and I'm wearing jeans and a hoodie just like this because I'm so sick. And we were on the cruise ship out in the middle of the Pacific and I called back and to one of my friends and I was like, I'm dying. You got to send me something. So they FedExed a package to Waikiki. And from that Thursday to that Monday when we ported, I was pretty much at the front of that boat just looking for land. So we ported in Waikiki. I went straight to the front desk, went straight to the bathroom, came out, cool as a cucumber. And my whole family was like, this is weird.
Wow.
So that happened. We married 6 months later, and then I was arrested for the first time a year after that.
Yeah.
There was telltale signs all throughout that year, but then when I caught that first charge, it just spiraled out of control.
Yeah.
And we were separated within a year after that.
Wow.
And so no kids or anything from that
No
relationship?
no kids from her. When we separated, I was right around 30 years old,
Okay.
and neither one of us had any children at that time.
Wow. Okay. So what happened next?
After that, things just kept spiraling. It was 5 years in and out of rehab. I think I went to upwards of 7 rehabs in
Wow.
5 years, not counting the detox centers to just go to try and get off. The physical withdrawals from heroin are insane. It won't kill you, but nothing will stop you from going to get that next high. So I think over that 5 years, I went to detox 10 times, rehab 7 times, and I think I went to jail 5 or 6 times. Just trying to get my act together. Mainly it was to dodge a prison sentence. That was the entire goal, was at my lawyer's discretion.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. What pushed you to rehab? Was it the legal complications? Was it family members intervening? What 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 initiated that for you? That I need help.
Yeah, it wasn't me saying I needed
Yeah.
help. I wanted to keep the party going. But it was mainly pushed from a lawyer. The biggest like charge that I got was in 2010, and I think I got 4 or 5 felony counts. And I remember getting bailed out and going to my lawyers the next day, and he's like, a 15-year prison sentence is what you're looking at as of right now.
Wow.
So he pushed me into detox, which got me sent to rehab. I got kicked out, and then I went back into detox, went to another rehab, got kicked out, and then I ran, and then I ended up just like, okay, we got to face the music. I called him. He's like, this is your last chance. So he got me into a 30-day rehab up in Woodward, Oklahoma. I completed it, and it got me a 3-year deferred sentence.
So I know like gentle, kind, chill Mark. Like, how does that guy get kicked out? And I know obviously you're in the drug realm there, but like, describe, like, how do you get kicked out of these centers? Like, you just throwing a fit or just not listening to anybody, or?
No, it's actually really funny. So the first rehab that I got kicked out of, we were there on July 4th weekend, and a bunch of us thought it would be cool to jump the electric fence into the cow pasture and go swimming in the pond and watch the fireworks. This one was up in Tonkawa, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So it's close enough to Ponca City. I don't know if the fireworks were in Tonkawa or Ponca City, but we jumped the fence and went swimming in this pond, watched the fireworks, and we broke rules by leaving property. So
you got kicked out.
yeah, I was still being cool, chill Mark.
Yeah.
I just
Just wanted to party.
just wanted to swim. But yeah, like I think there was 12 of us in that center, and I think 7 of us got kicked out for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness.
So you get a 3-year deferred sentence.
Got a 3-year deferred sentence,
Okay.
which is nothing really. It's due. I think I got 100 hours of community service and check in with a probation officer once every 6 months or so. So that left months in between where I could just keep the party going.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So what did that look like? How long did that go on?
That went on for 3 years, all the way up until my wife, we were still married at the time, wanted to go out to LA to see her brother, and I couldn't legally leave the state without my PO's permission. So she drove me up to my PO's office, and I would have just gone without asking, but being the woman she was, she's like, we're going to do this by the books. And he's like, yeah, you can go, but you got to pass this drug test. And so he pulled me into the little room. I peed in the cup and failed for 5 different substances. And then that immediately launched me into supervised probation, where I had to meet with a probation officer once a month, if not more. They could call me. I had to call. That's what it was. I had to call every day. And if it was my color, I had to show back up. So this particular incident caused my family to force me into rehab. So they sent me to this small little rehab on the northwest side of Oklahoma City. All the ones that I've been up to at this point were state funded. This one was a private. And they would drive me from northwest Oklahoma City down to Cleveland County, Norman, to drug test whenever my color came up. If I hadn't been in that rehab, I would have never made it through the supervised probation. That was the only reason I made it. But I did it.
Yeah.
And then I got kicked out of that rehab immediately for drug use.
Yeah.
So not a whole lot of heart change. It was just consequences with no change in behavior.
Yeah, no change in behavior whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I got out of that rehab, got a job, got a decent job downtown, burned that bridge, and then ended up back in detox, and then got out of detox, found a job in Norman. I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and then I got arrested here. Wasn't supposed to leave the state. I left the state anyway, and then got pulled over in Nebraska. I ran from the cops, got in a high-speed chase. So I had 2 charges, one here, one in Nebraska, both felonies, and I was in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that your rock bottom? Would you
No.
say?
No.
No.
No. We go deeper.
Okay.
We go deeper. So
you
that,
endure.
huh?
You endure.
Yeah, for sure. No, I wanted to ride the garbage truck all the way to the dump, as they say, and I did. So these 2 charges, Oklahoma picked up the charges in Nebraska. I had to spend the Christmas and New Year of 2015, so Christmas of 2014, in this tiny little jail cell up in Nebraska. I think I did about a month and a half. I came back to Oklahoma, and they picked up my probation, and they bundled it in with my charges here, and I got put into Cleveland County Drug Court, which is a very intensive program. You have to show up to court in front of a judge once a week. You call 6 days a week to see if you have to drug test. You start out with 3 drug tests a week. You have to do 3 to 5 AA meetings and counseling. So it was difficult, especially with someone that had just lost their license for another 5 years. So I moved to Norman, still couldn't get sober.
Did you want to?
I mean, I knew at this point, I knew there was no way around it.
Yeah.
At this point, I was pretty miserable to the point where I was like, yeah, I want to get sober, but I couldn't break that chain of addiction. But I remember going into my probation officer's office and just being like, you've got to send me to prison, because that's the only thing that's going to get me sober. And she told me she wasn't ready to send me to prison yet. So they sent me back to the rehab that I got kicked out of for swimming in the pond. So it went full circle. Had the same counselor. I graduated from that rehab. Came back, moved into sober living, and started doing the AA thing, and got a sponsor, did all the drug court requirements, and I stayed sober for 9 months. And then after that, I met this girl who would become the biological mother of my oldest son. And we started doing things that wouldn't show up on drug tests. So I had a solid 9 months of sobriety. And then we started playing around with those substances, and it started going back downhill.
What was in your heart at that time? What do you think your heart was like drawing you back into doing substances? Like were you pulled into it, or was it just something that kind of happened, or
I would say I was pretty pulled back into it. You know, this is the first time. A significant point is that this is the first time in 20 years that I was even like acknowledging the existence of a God. You know, I was praying, I was going to meetings, which is not Christian based, but it's spiritually based, you know. But I was still very weak in my faith, and I was just kind of testing the waters at that point in time, you know, like exploring other options. I knew without a doubt that Marc could not keep Marc sober. So I was really starting to, those seeds were being planted, if you will. But they hadn't taken root when I met, and I can't put all the blame on her. But yeah, just the two of us combined was toxic in itself. And
Yeah.
we went to we went to Disney World with her family in 2000, Christmas of 2015, and the car broke down in Louisiana. And we were walking through Walmart waiting for it to get repaired, and she had me come out to the van, and she had this leafy substance, and it was kratom, which is like this tea stuff. But yeah, I drank it, and I didn't think it would do anything, but it did after 9 months of being sober. And after that, we were doing it every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So needless to say, we still had a year and a half left of drug court. She got pregnant while we were at Disney World. We came back. We were drinking kratom every day. And by the time Miles was born, we were, I mean, she was prescribed hydrocodone because it was an emergency C-section. And I was phase 5 at that time, so I only had to drug test once a week. So I knew if I drug tested on Monday, I wouldn't be drug tested again till Monday of the next week. So that gave me 3 days to take pills. So by the time I graduated drug court, I was fully strung out again.
Wow. Jeez. So then what?
Gets worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets worse.
Yeah. You got a little baby at home now too.
Yeah, so that was the only positive during this chapter of my life. I had this job that was a relatively good job considering the facts. But I had this precious little baby at home. And you know, he was my world. Even in the midst of my addiction, like I would go to work, change his diaper, go to work, come home. She would still be in bed as his diaper was full of excrement. So I would change his diaper, feed him, put him back in bed with her, go back to work, come back, take care of him. By the time I got off work, her 2 daughters would be at the house, so I'd take care of them, give them baths, rock them to sleep, stay up till 2, go to bed, wake up, repeat. Yeah, and I got worn out real quick.
No kidding.
Doing all that while maintaining an addiction. I graduated drug court in February of 2017, and she graduated in early April. And by the time she graduated that night, she was like, "You ready to get high?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we were driving around. Her drug of choice was methamphetamine. So we were driving around, smoking meth, sniffing. Is this getting too R-rated? Okay. we were driving around doing drugs, high on drugs, with this precious little baby in the back seat, acting neurotic, and it all, like, I say it all came to a head. The situation with him came to a head. Not even 2 weeks later, she went to the hospital with him. I guess the story I heard was, while I was at work, she fell off the front porch steps and dropped him and took him to the hospital. And she called me from the hospital just acting neurotic. And I came home and was taking care of him. Her girls weren't there that night, and there was a knock on the door, and it was a DHS worker. I guess one of the hospital workers had called and reported her actions or her behavior, and so they came to do a welfare check, and she brought 2 drug tests and was like, one of you needs to pass if you want this baby to stay here. And neither one of us would pee in the cup because we both knew it was pointless. So I had to make the call to my parents. They were the only people that could come through and pick him up, that we knew. Probably by far the most traumatizing night of my life. Words can't describe what it feels like to be told that the state of Oklahoma deems you unfit as a parent, Especially, like, one thing that has always been true is that, I've loved my kids and my family, like, from the bottom of my heart, and to just have that stripped, as out of my mind as I was, I'll never forget the feeling of, like, packing up his pack and play and packing up his favorite toys. And
How did your mom and dad relate to you in that moment, picking up their grandson?
I think they could see it in my eyes. They were compassionate.
Yeah.
At a time when justifiable anger was ever appropriate, they were very compassionate and very loving.
Yeah.
And I will be forever thankful for that, because it was not only difficult for me, but I'm sure it was highly traumatic for them, as well.
Yeah. So is that enough to change your behavior, or what happened after that?
What happened after that is we left the house.
Yeah.
I mean, balls to the wall after that for 4 months straight. We were just running the gambit through Norman, Oklahoma. I was being pulled out of cop cars every couple days, hanging out with well-known drug dealers, boosting out of Walmarts and Lowe's and Home Depots. Just craziness. And I finally got arrested. I got arrested in Cleveland County on January 28th and arrested in Oklahoma County on August 13th. And they didn't. So August 13th, July 28th was just a minor possession charge. I got let out 5 days later. August 13th in Oklahoma County was a DUI, possession of heroin, and possession of a firearm. And as soon as I got arrested, I was like, this is it. I'm going to prison. So I sat in, they have like their admin floor. I sat there for 4 days and just detoxed. And then they called me out to move me up to the 8th floor, which is the high bond, you ain't going home floor. And I remember sitting in that jail cell, or when they called me out onto the unit to go up to the 8th floor, I was standing by this table and I looked down, and there was this little Gideon Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and I just heard this voice said, "Take that Bible." And so I snatched it up and stuck it in the band of my pants, and took it up to the 8th floor with me. And once I hit that 8th floor, I just started reading it. Um, Half out of following, I truly believe that was the spirit just like slapping me in the face, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm right here." Half being spirit led and half out of boredom. I read that. I started reading the gospel. Um, they they took the charges away. The gun went missing. The heroin went missing. So they had to drop those charges, and they charged me initially with a misdemeanor DUI, but then they found out that I had 5 DUIs at this point. So they dropped that charge, and they were going to refile it. And if you're arrested and no formal charges are filed, they have to let you go after 2 weeks. So I remember sitting in this jail cell, and I was just praying. I was like, "God," very selfish prayer.
Mm-hmm.
"God, if you ever answer a prayer, please let me be out for my son's birthday," because he was about to turn 1. And so I was in there from August 3rd or August 13th until August 28th, August 29th, and the door opened. They were like, "Right, pack up your stuff. You're going home." And I was like, "What? What's going on?" Because I had already come to accept the fact that I was going to prison. But they told me once I left, they were like, "You need to call every day because you're gonna be charged. You're gonna have to go through the process. You're just doing it from the outside." So I left and I booked it. Had another 3 weeks just on the run. Um, I had a court date coming up in Cleveland County, which um, her mom had paid the bail on. So she came and picked me up and demanded that I stay at her house until that court date because she knew I was just going to run. So I went down to Noble and stayed with her. Went to my court date. Was there for my son's first birthday. Very humiliating experience because my parents had to put the whole party on, and I officially got arrested 2 days after that
Mm-hmm.
for failure to appear and felony warrants.
Yeah.
Wow.
Goodness.
And that was the last time I was ever arrested.
Yeah. So you were actually booked, charged, went to jail.
Yeah. So I think it's real important part because this is where like God's like really creeping in. One of my favorite stories is in I think it's Second Kings. It might be First Kings with Elijah when he's on the mountaintop and there was an earthquake and God wasn't in it, and then there was a wind and God wasn't in it, and then there was the whisper and that's where God was. Well, sometimes that's what it is. It's that still small voice, but sometimes he comes with that slap in the face, and he was there doing that constantly during this point in my life. I was sitting in a hotel room at 5 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and I looked up, and there was this preacher on the screen, and all of a sudden, 1 Peter 5:8 came on. The be sober, be vigilant, and that was the only part that I focused on was be sober. And I shook her awake. I was like, "We got to go. We got to go to rehab. We got to get out of here. Like, we're gonna die." So for like a week, I was like dead set on going to rehab. And the morning that I got arrested, we were ducked out hiding from the police on the side of someone's house, and that's where I did my last shot. And I did this shot, and I got sick. I rolled over onto my knees behind this air conditioning unit and threw up. And I was like, "God, if you're ever going to answer another prayer, get me to rehab." please, today, like I'm about to die. I was like 112 pounds, 115 pounds, just a walking skeleton.
Wow.
So I said this prayer, and we stood up and walked around the corner, and a detective pulled up and arrested me on felony warrants. So didn't go to rehab, went to jail, but he got me off the streets. And then from then, I'll never forget it. It was like a sigh of relief, like a breath of fresh air. You know, I had a bed to sleep on. I knew I was going to get fed. I was off the streets. I knew I was going to prison, but I was at peace about it. Parents didn't know where I was. Son's only 1 year old. He didn't know where I was. My parents had blocked the Oklahoma County number the last time that I had been in jail because I was just calling to ask him to get me out. But one day I had met this guy, and I was like, hey, man, can you please just call my parents? And he called my parents, and my dad answered from this guy's PIN number. And he was like, where have you been? I was like, Dad, I'm in jail. He's like, it's the same charges. I'm not in, this isn't anything new, but I just wanted you to know where I was. And that reestablished the connection with them, which was awesome. From then I got to, kind of talk to my son. He was only 1, so he didn't really know what was going on. And then my dad showed up the day that I got sentenced to prison. So there was a lot of healing in that,
Yeah.
just to know that they hadn't fully given up on me, because I had pretty much fully given up on myself by this point. So yeah, I signed for a 3-year prison sentence October the 26th and got shipped out November the 1st of 2017.
Wow.
Went to A&R, which is the admissions and receiving, I think is what it stands for, down in Lexington. Read the New Testament twice, prayed constantly, started exercising in the jail cell. You're on lockdown 23 hours out of the day. So you have a lot of time.
Yeah.
You have a lot of time to feel. A lot of time for you to either get in your head about stuff or to spend time with God. And I did. I spent a whole lot of time with God. Started this thing where I would draw a picture every Monday and mail it out to my son with one of my stamps. Still have the whole collection.
Oh, wow.
Every Monday there's a picture. Did that the entire time I was incarcerated, but it started in A&R. About halfway through, I ran out of ideas, and I started with the letter A, and I just started drawing him a picture of all this stuff that begins with A, and it kind of told this little story. And I made it all the way through Z, and then I remember I had finished the drawing for Z, the letter Z, and I put it in the mailbox, and I got called into the office like three hours later, and they were like, we're letting you go a month early, just because we don't have room for you anymore. So that was a pretty cool experience. So yeah, I started that in A&R, read the New Testament twice, read Psalms twice. Pastors would come through, they would pray with us. And I had it in my head that I was going to hit this yard and just do right the entire time. That's not what happened. I like to relate that to that parable where it's like, if you clean the house and don't fill it with other things, the spirits are going to come back 7 times stronger. And, I was making an effort, but I didn't have any brotherhood. I wasn't surrounded by believers. And then I was just thrown in to the wolves on December 14th. I went to William S. Keys up in Woodward, or just north of Woodward, Oklahoma. to finish out my sentence. And I hit the ground running.
Mm.
I was high within a day on multiple substances, smoking cigarettes. Yeah, just right in the middle of it.
Hmm.
Um, and that went on for a month, a little over a month. Um, just getting miserable, you know. It's all good when the party's going on, but once that yard dries up and there's nothing to be found, then you're just left with yourself. Just hating yourself,
Mm.
you know, just allowing that enemy to come in and just tell you you're a failure and you're never gonna amount to anything and all this and all that. So by the time January 16th came, I was just miserable. I was completely and utterly miserable. I was at my wit's end. I was stuck in prison, just surrounded by all these people I didn't want to be surrounded by. And I was laying in my rack at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was just watching these guys go by with the push broom because they'll
Yeah.
sweep the floor and then shake it off in the corner and go through it for cigarettes or stuff that people have dropped. I was just watching it, and I was like, man, if something doesn't change, like this is the best I have to look forward to. And I remember just laying there. I was like, God, if you're ever gonna answer a third prayer, like this is it. Please just break this chain of addiction. Like I have tried rehab, I've tried AA, I've tried everything, but I cannot get past this. And I fell asleep, not feeling any different. Woke up the next day, didn't feel any different. But I was surrounded by the same guys, slept in the same bunk, in the same building. But something was different. Because the first time I was offered anything, I said no, without even thinking about it. And one day turned into two, and 2 days turned into three, and 3 days turned into four. Uh, I'd like to say that I was like this reformed Christian overnight. That was not the case. I was very rough around the edges, still smoking cigarettes, still hanging out with people I shouldn't be hanging out with. But the sobriety was there. I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was sitting with these guys at 2 o'clock in the morning one night. I would draw tattoo templates for the gang members, and they would take it to the tattoo guy, and I would get paid in cigarettes, and the tattoo guy would get paid in cigarettes. But I remember sitting there with the tattoo guy one night, like 2 in the morning. He's just all sniffing a line, and he hands me the book that it's on. I'm like, no, man. He's like, I haven't given you any of this in months. And I was like, yeah, I haven't done any in 2 months now. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, 2 months sober. And he's like, good for you. And yeah, man, that was the beginning of the journey right there.
Yeah.
From there, I got involved with the chapel. Kind of had this brotherhood grow up around me in prison, where we would go to every church service. And yeah, it was a cool transformation from going from completely and utterly miserable in this hellhole to just being able to walk around like laughing and smiling with these guys, and having guys there to pray with you. And we did Bible study. It got to the point where we would have our Bible study in the poker room, and they would call off the poker matches for 45 minutes so we could do our Bible study. And some of these guys would come in and ask for prayers for their family. It was a cool experience.
Wow.
That's neat.
That's so cool. So how much more time did you spend there?
So I spent 5 months there after getting sober. I transferred to Granite, Oklahoma after that for a month and a half. And then I was shipped out of there to Oklahoma Halfway House, which is downtown Oklahoma City, for a month after that. So all in all, I did about 11, 12 months of incarceration.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you stepped out of there and back into the real world?
Uh, it was an eye opener. My first job was while I was at the halfway house. It was at a Brazilian restaurant in Midtown as a dishwasher. And those first couple of months, I like to say I was like SpongeBob. You know how he's like whistling
Yeah.
while he's cleaning
Yeah.
the restaurant. Yeah, I had a smile on my face. I was living life. I was just happy to be surrounded by people that weren't convicts.
Yeah.
Just reintegrated. I was making, I think, $9.25 an hour, so I was pumped.
Yeah.
But then getting thrown out into the real world, I had it in my head that it was going to be like the best day of my life. And it was not. It was a day full of anxiety and fears. And I was thrown right back into Norman, Oklahoma, which is, where I was right in the middle of
Yeah.
it. So yeah, it was not the greatest day of my life.
Yeah. Were you able to step into any church community or anything like that? Or
So I jumped into the AA community at this time. I was going to 3 to 5 meetings a week, and then going to my parents' church up in Moore on the weekends. So I was at least plugged in on the weekends. But I was in sober living, and there was a couple guys that had also found God while they were in prison, and so we got to, kind of be surrounded by each other and feed
Yeah.
off each other and hold each other accountable.
yeah. That's
So
cool.
if we just took it one day at a time,
Yeah.
and then days stacked on days and months stacked on months.
Yeah.
I think I was in sober living until December, no, 2019. So about a year and a half I was in sober living after I got out.
Yeah. So then next is like you meet your wife, your now wife.
Yeah.
Very shortly after, right? Like not too long.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's still a whirlwind. It's just in a positive direction this time. So I get out of sober living. I'm still I work for this dog boarding place, making $9 an hour, walking the yard, picking up dog turds and breaking up dog fights. Uh, could not get another job for
Yeah.
anything. Getting highly discouraged. And I remember walking this yard, just scraping up dog crap. I was like, God, this is so stupid. This is so stupid. Why am I walking in this yard, picking up dog crap? And again, I just heard this voice that I know is not me. It's like, hey, if justice were served back in 2017, you'd be doing consecutive life sentences. So maybe you should just be grateful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just had this calm come over me, and that was on a Friday. That Monday, the job that I have now called me for an interview. So they called me for an interview. I had applied for, it's a fiber optics company. I had applied for a laboring position, but they called for a drafting position, which is more in line with what my degree's in. So I got hired on there. 6 months later, COVID happened. Everyone gets sent home. The world shut down. The girlfriend that I was with, she leaves. And then one of my close friends gets married, and I'm at his wedding, and I look up and I see this pair of blue eyes staring at me, and I'm just like, okay, here we go. I had been interested in her for the better half of a year, but she wasn't having it due to outside circumstances. She didn't show any interest in me. But I'd message her every once in a while. We were friends. But we locked eyes during this wedding and never looked back after
You
that.
took advantage of the moment.
Took advantage of
Yeah.
that moment, just ran with it. So I was actually roommates with her brother at the time, and me and her and him and her kids went to Colorado on a trip to go hiking. It kind of came out to the kids that we were talking at this point. Two of them, the older two, met me with open arms. The youngest told me that on a list of her 10 most disliked people, I would be number 20. So I was like, ugh. There was a lot of resistance from her. She was 12 at the time. That was October of 2020. January of 2021, we found out we were pregnant, and that's when I went to my first base camp, just right in the middle of a whirlwind. I was introduced. Oh, so at this time, I'm highly involved at Life Church Moore. Once I got with, well, I guess she was just a girlfriend at the time. Once I got with Amy, we had this schedule where I would go with Miles and my parents to their church out of tradition. 'Cause, I was still relatively fresh out of prison. He was 3, turning 4. We were trying to be as least disruptive on him as possible. So I would go to church with him and my parents, and then I'd leave, and him and I would go with Amy and her girls to Life Church Moore. And I was involved in a men's life group with Zach Flora and Dennis Arnold, and that was the first time I heard of True North. Jeremiah came and talked about it, and I was like, man, this sounds cheesy. Sounds so cheesy.
Well, I remember Amy like dragging you to me that one time too.
Yeah,
And she
yeah.
was like, "Tell him all about True North." We were like in the Life Kids hallway or something.
Yeah, we were, and you were like, "Yeah, it's cool, man. We go and hang out for a few days, and we shoot guns." And I'm like, "Man, I'm a felon. I can't even be around guns." Like, so I just disregarded it. But then Jeremiah came, and he kind of talked about it, and I was like, "Okay, you put a nice twist on it, but still sounds pretty cheesy." And then stuff just started. All these changes started happening. Amy and I knew we were getting married. I was basically thrown into being a teenage girl dad overnight.
So in comes the fourth prayer to God. If there's only one.
Yeah. If there's only 4 prayers that you hear, God, please equip me to father these girls in a loving and godly way. Because it was difficult. There were so many growing pains during that. We went on that trip to Colorado, and I like to say she kidnapped me because I never went back to her brother's house. I went back once to pack up, but all of a sudden we were all living together, and it was hectic. And so the week I found out she was pregnant is the week I went to my first base camp, and I was just blown away by the content, man. I was blown away. It was just such an eye-opening experience. Not only that, but I also got to start developing these relationships with these guys that at the time I had no idea, but they've developed into like some of my greatest mentors. Like, you were there, Jeremiah was there, Sean McDonough was there, Zach Flora was there. I think 6 of us from that life group went. Like, it really was pivotal in me establishing that community that I needed. Because at this time, a lot of the people that I went to AA with and that were my AA tribe did not agree with my decisions on what I was doing. So there was a lot of static there, and a lot of them quit talking to me. So basically overnight I lost my tribe and then was thrown into this housing situation with these girls that I was barely starting to get to know, like it was a very rocky period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So during that base camp, was there a time where God really showed up for you and revealed anything to you or spoke to you?
Yeah. So like I think there's no disputing that like God really speaks to me through creation. Like always has. I've always been captivated by nature and by animals. And I remember I don't remember what session it was after. I think it was after the wound session. I was walking around just like praying and just thinking about all these wounds, some of these wounds that I had suffered. Most of them were self-inflicted, and just trying to like wrap my brain around it and ask God what it meant. And I made my way to the backside of this building, and I was just sitting there praying and maybe crying a little bit. But I hear this noise, and I look up, and there's this little brown dog, and he's just like tearing down this gravel driveway, just like tongue hanging out, like sprinting, just smiling. And I just heard that still voice just be like, as wild and free as that dog is, like that's as free as I want you to be.
Oh,
And then all of a sudden, this lady comes down on this side by side, and she's like, "Have you seen this little brown dog?" I'm like, "Yeah, he just took off that way." And she's like, "That little shit." Sorry, I can't say
You're
that.
good.
But and then she takes off, and in such a session that is so like deep and like, like that wound session. I mean, if you let it, I mean, it'll tear you up.
Can be heavy.
God really showed up to just be like, hey, you don't have to live in it, man. You can live free.
Wow.
So
That's beautiful. So
yeah.
since then, have you started to experience a little bit of that in your own life? Are you still walking towards that? Where you
Yeah,
at?
it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey. I think other people on the outside see it more than I see it. My my mother's constantly making comments to my wife about how she's never seen me so confident and so happy and so carefree. Let alone the guys that the True North guys that have gotten to witness the transition. There's been comments made on that end. Some days I really feel it. Some days I feel real spirit led, and then other days not so much.
Yeah.
As real as our God is, we've got an enemy that is just as real, and
Yeah.
he likes to creep in any way that he can. So some days it's a battle.
I think what I love about your story is so many of our True North guys kind of face their reality when they get to base camp. Like that's that's the eye-opening moment for them that, oh my gosh, like this is wild. This has happened. You had that multiple times, right? You
Yeah.
had that rock bottom moment like, oh my gosh, like this isn't good. This isn't what God has for me. And he showed up and answered that for you several times and took that addiction away from you. And so you're coming to camp and God just shows you what he has for you and a promise for you instead of your first experience being just this having to dig and excavate and all that. It's like, no, like, here's my promise to you. Here's the goodness we're going to build on.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
has been cool to see.
I mean, there was a lot of digging and excavating, but yeah, thank God he's so gentle. Like he knows exactly what we need in every circumstance, and I get so overwhelmed with gratitude, like thinking like, I mean, he's a God of restoration. He came to restore what was lost, and my life is almost completely restored today. Most people that meet me on a daily basis have no idea that I was a that I'm a recovering heroin addict, or, you know, that I've got a DOC number from the state of Oklahoma, or that I served a year. You know, most people look at me and they think that I'm just your normal average Joe, and I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're going through this transition right now where Miles is staying with us anywhere from 5 to 7 nights out of the week. There's been talks of changing, like reversing the adoption, because I lost all parental rights when I went to prison. You know, a year ago that was not even an option.
Yeah.
You know, who would have thought 6 years ago that God would not only re-give me one of his little princes, but also give me another little guy and 3 women and a grandbaby, you know, like to entrust me to be their leader. Like, that's just crazy, man.
That's so good.
It's crazy.
I believe you're trustworthy too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Recently, we don't have to share this if you don't want to, but several months ago in group, you kind of talked about just a difficulty of hearing from God and kind of a frustration. And it seems like you've witnessed some breakthrough in that. And could you share a little bit on that?
Yeah. I think it's crazy. It's crazy some of the lies that we can start believing ourselves. You know, like when I sit here and I tell you guys my story, like it's evident that God,
Yeah.
like, you know, sometimes God whispers, sometimes God screams, sometimes God sends you to time out. Like it's evident when I'm sitting here telling my story. But I had all these lies and agreements and strongholds that like I couldn't hear from God. And you know, we do the Sunday night small group, and I went to the Ascent a month and a half ago, and you know, sometimes it just looks different. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like that story with Elijah. Sometimes it comes in an earthquake and a mountain, or in an earthquake and in a wind and in rushing waters, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just comes in that still small voice. And I think a lot of the growth in the past 6 months has just been more cognizant of that still small voice. Going to the Ascent was also eye opening. So don't stop at the base camp. Go to the Ascent.
There you go.
You know, like the base camp sets you up for like this, with this strong foundation of what it looks like to be this strong Christian man. But Ascent like sets you up to like this relationship with this God that's not just one way, like with some distant God. It's this relationship with that's a two-way relationship. You know, like
Yeah.
if you truly listen and you can quiet your mind enough, and open your eyes and heart, you'll hear from God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
He's always speaking.
always speaking, hands down. We have to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear and the heart to receive it. And that's what the past 6 months to a year's been, just God peeling off those layers and breaking down those walls and just allowing me to hear that voice.
Yeah.
It's
beautiful.
been really cool.
That's so good. Man, Ryan, if you don't have any more questions, I'm
Man, just thank you for sharing your story. It's incredible.
yeah.
And it's so easy to see God working whenever you look back. Kind of hindsight's 2020, but learning to walk with him is key. So I totally agree with you. Just got to be still. But it's been cool to see you getting more and more involved with True North, and dude, you really are like a joy bomb
Yeah.
around. Like you wear the gratitude on your face, and
Yep.
it's always so cool to see you, because you exhibit the joy that is coming from within, the Holy Spirit within you. And so, and now I understand it more because I didn't know all of your story. I knew bits and pieces, but it totally makes sense, man. You have everything to be very grateful for, and God's done an awesome work in you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys.
Yeah,
I appreciate True North, man. This ministry has changed my life, opened my eyes to a God that I never would have thought possible. I'm excited to just keep diving deeper, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just dive deeper.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, man.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate you coming on. It's been a blessing.
Thank you.
Yeah.